This episode contains content that may be alarming to some listeners. Please check the show notes for a more detailed description of the specific topics. Hey guys, and welcome to the Different on Purpose podcast. I'm Brittany, and I'm joined by the lovely Jenna Ryan. Welcome back.
Hi, everybody. It feels so good to be back. I feel like it's been forever. I know it's only been like 2 weeks, I think, since we recorded our last episode. Thanks so much to Colby, stepping in for last week. So hope you guys enjoyed that. But yeah, I'm happy to be back and discuss our topic for today.
Today, we're going to be talking about forgiveness and the important role that it plays in our healing journey.
We're going to be kind of discussing like what forgiveness is, its benefits in our healing journey, practical ways of achieving it, and some real life examples of what that looks like.
All right, let's get started. So, how are you? How have your last 2-ish weeks been since we've last recorded and last talked?
It's been good. It's been it's been really good because I've been really like focused on my whole like bread making journey. I'm in a bread making era, specifically sourdough. So I started a sourdough starter because I saw somebody on, of course, TikTok making bread. And I'm like, I can do that and I want to. And I've been hooked ever since. So at this point, I've made like 5 sourdough loaves and I'm absolutely in love with the process. So it's been really fun.
I think it's funny you started with sourdough because I feel like that's like the hardest one to do.
Oh,
I've seen
yeah.
and saved so many videos of people making like loaf bread that looks so
Yeah.
soft and delicious. And then you went through this process of like creating starters and then letting it rise and then letting it rise again. And then
It's such a
I don't know.
process.
Just seems like,
So
yeah.
I think what I've learned is like it's not hard necessarily to make sourdough. It's just a lengthy process. And if you don't like actually like do the steps of the process correctly, then it's really hard to bake it. Sorry, I have the burps. But it's been really fun. And I've had like 3 loaves not really turn out too great, but like my first one was perfect. So after I did the first one, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to keep doing it. And the second and third one, I think I got too confident and I was like, oh, these turned out real flat like a pancake. But yeah, it's been really fun. I've been really enjoying that. But yeah, how about you?
Well, the first week since we talked was pretty normal, just busy
Yeah.
work, school, home. I mean, school, not school for me, school for Colby.
No.
So he's finishing up his master's program. So he has school a couple nights a week, virtually, but he's locked in his office. And so then it's just me and the kids. And so just a normal week. This past week sucked complete and total ass.
Oh no.
Everly started her spring break week. So Friday when she got out of school, she came home with a fever, had an ear infection like Friday through Sunday, was feverish and down. Sunday, we finally took her to urgent care, found out that it was a double ear infection. She was negative for everything else. Started antibiotics. By Monday, she was bouncing off the walls back to her normal self.
Aw.
Everybody went to school. Well, she stayed home, but because she was on spring break. But Declan went to school. We went to work, did our normal Monday thing. Tuesday morning, I dropped Declan off at daycare. I didn't even make it the 10 to 15 minutes from his daycare to my work. I was pulling in the parking lot at work, and they called me, and they were like, Declan needs to go home. And so Declan had the nastiest stomach bug. And so it's worse when, like, babies have it because they can't even tell you they're about to be sick. And so it just comes out of nowhere every single time. So he had a nasty stomach bug. Got over it. Of course, as soon as he got over it, then Everly got the stomach bug, and so Everly was down for the count. And then after she got it, then Colby got it.
Oh,
and
God.
Then as soon as Colby was better, I was worried that I was going to get it, but luckily I never did. But then my parents came to town. We had for the weekend. We had a family wedding to go to on Saturday. Went to the wedding. It was kind of like an all-day event. Came back home. Easter Sunday was just busy making all of the rounds between my family before they headed back home, and then, Colby's parent, like mom, and then his dad, and then it was just an all-day affair. And so by the time I got in bed on Sunday, I was like, okay, I'm dying. Like, I am dead. I'm down for the count. I need to sleep. And so I probably went to bed around like midnight, 1 o'clock. I don't know what time I finally fell asleep. And then Everly came in here at like 1:30 because she was having some issue with her ear, I guess. Like she was having really bad ringing in her ear and it
Mhm.
woke her up and she was freaking out about it and she didn't go back to sleep till like 3 a.m. So I got like 2 hours of sleep Sunday.
Oh
So
god.
it's been a week. It's been like,
Bless your heart, dude.
I was just like, man, can I get a refund on being a mom? I just don't, I don't want to do this week. It was terrible. And it was a terrible way for Everly to spend her spring break. But
I know that sucks.
yeah,
Oh
I've had
no.
much better weeks. Let's say I don't ever want to do that again.
Yeah. Well,
So,
at least, I mean, I guess the good side of it is they were on spring break, so they didn't really have to worry about missing school.
yeah.
I don't know. That does suck though. I've been sick on spring breaks and stuff before, and I'm like, this freaking sucks. I got the kind of like I don't know if it was a stomach bug or what it was. So we had gone to sushi and I got super, super sick a couple days after. It wasn't immediately, which made me think that it wasn't actually like food poisoning, but I could not stop getting sick. And it like kept me up through the night. It only lasted like a couple of days and I felt kind of crummy after just because I didn't have any energy. But I've heard it's kind of going around. I think
Yeah,
it
it's
was like a bug
definitely.
or something.
I mean, I know so many people that were saying like, "Oh, my kids have it. My kids have it." Like the
Yeah.
same time that mine did. So, definitely think it was going around.
Yeah.
But yeah, made for a terrible week. So,
I'm sorry.
it's okay. It's part of the job,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So what's one thing that you're currently working on doing differently in your life?
So this is actually a good one. And back to the bread. Okay, this is back to the bread. I'm trying. I'm trying to teach myself to be patient in the things that require patience, if that makes sense. So like with the bread making, the sourdough, it's a huge process, and I'm trying to. I'm basically trying to like relearn how to slow down a little bit because with I think it's an ADHD thing. I'm pretty sure from what I've looked up, but I need everything to be done really quickly. I need to get quick dopamine hits from things. And like, since my medicine hasn't been working great, it's been a big struggle as of late. So it's really difficult for me to do certain tasks and to be patient enough to finish them completely. So, what I've really been trying to work on, especially through the sourdough process, is learning patience and realizing that, like, there are things that take time and it's okay if you're not on all the time. Like sourdough is a very slow process and it's yes productive when you are doing things, but it's not like you're not going to do it quickly if that makes sense. So just trying to like have different avenues and I would practice that in different avenues has been a big one, specifically like cleaning. So my beauty room is what I call it, is where I film and do all my stuff. It's a hot mess right now and learning to be like, okay, like I can pick one thing up a day. I don't have to like go in and like clean the whole thing. Like I probably should do that, but if I don't have the energy for it, go in and clean one thing. And I've been doing that this week too. And just teaching myself like patience is fine and like doing something small is okay too because it's going to get you to your end result if you're just consistent with it. So that's one thing that I've been trying to work on and it's really difficult, which is why 3 of my sourdough loaves have turned out not great because I rushed the process. But yeah, that's kind of what I've been working on and yeah, just trying to
The
trying to
old
self-improve
saying,
always.
good things come to those who wait.
I
Good
know.
sourdough comes to those who are patient, Jenna.
Who pros the patience. It's all about patience. Some people let their sourdoughs proof for like 36 hours. And I'm like, I did 24 hours once, and that was the one that turned out perfectly. So that is very true. Like sometimes it just needs time. And yeah, sometimes it just needs time. But yeah, what about
You
you?
wanted those sandwiches.
I know. And we went through the first sourdough loaf so fast. Like I was like, oh, this will last us a week.
I
No.
know you sent
I
me a
think we were
picture of the
just
second one, and I was
excited.
like, "Geez, like they're
Yeah.
eating a lot of bread." But
Lots of bread. I had to throw one away because it was like super dense, but we have like two just sitting on the counter right now. I baked
but
one this morning.
but if I was eating sandwiches that looked like the sandwiches you're sending me, I would eat them all the time too. So
I know I need to go get more ingredients for that too. It was so good. So it was the sourdough, and then like I toasted the sourdough with olive oil like on a little fry pan, and I did burrata cheese and Roma tomatoes, and then I did prosciutto and salami, a little bit of balsamic glaze, and then arugula, and then like a little bit more balsamic glaze. So good. It was
well, you sent me
literally so
another
good.
one. You sent me had like avocado in it.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah. We did like a turkey avocado one.
Yeah, that one looks
We've
so
been
good.
sandwich fiends over here lately.
One thing that I've been trying to do differently, and it really smacked me in the face today, is I've been trying to be more honest.
Hmm.
So, um, I won't go into the details of this situation, but Colby and I got into we had we didn't really get into an argument. Like it was just like we disagreed, we knew we disagreed, and then like we just didn't talk about it again.
Mhm.
And it was one of those things that I could have easily been like, we're just not going to talk about it. Like I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about it. Because I felt like bringing it back up after the fact would just lead to another argument, and so I was just like, I don't wanna do this," but, like,
Mhm.
I think it was probably a full, like, 24 hours later that I was just like, "Okay, like, it's not gonna stop eating me alive until I just tell you how I honestly feel about it," and so we were
Mhm.
able to have, like, a good, honest conversation, and then just, like, apologize and be like, "Well, obviously, it just came down to, like, miscommunication."
Yeah.
Like I didn't take what he was saying the right way, and like obviously he was like that's not how I meant it, etc.
Yeah.
So, um I think that that was like the first situation where I was like, man, it like was really good to just be honest.
Yeah.
And
Good.
then t- today I had a friend tell me about like an invite to a church event that she's going to and I was just like, not that I don't wanna go because I, like, love Jesus, whatever, but I was like, I don't I don't know about going with a friend because we
Mhm.
haven't been to church probably in, like, a year, honestly. It's probably been
Yeah.
close to a year. I think around July will be a year. And so, um and it's because, like, I took a job where I was working weekends, and so I
Mhm.
was never home. I was working every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 12-hour shifts, and so Colby was not going, like I mean, the weekends are so hard for him that he was like, "I can't go and manage both the kids with, like, Declan's social issues and, like,
Yeah.
everything," so, we just haven't gone. We were, like, watching it online for a little bit and then just listening to, like, church podcasts, like, separately, I guess, like, in the car
Yeah.
and whatever, so we try to get in, what we can, but, like, it's just been really busy, and so now that I'm not working weekends, we keep saying, like, "Oh, we need to get back into it, we need to get back into it," and we just haven't, partially
Yeah.
because we know it's gonna be really, really hard on Declan, and so we keep using that as an excuse, which I know is not a good one, but, that on top of just the last few weeks and weekends have just been so busy.
Yeah.
So we when I know when I stop going to church for a while and then I start going back, I always just get, like, smacked in the face with, like, the Holy Spirit and, like,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I cry uncontrollably the entire time, and so I was like, "I really don't know, like, if I wanna do that in front of, like, my friend." Like, it's different doing it in front of my
Yeah.
husband, like, you married me for better or worse, like,
Yeah.
whatever, but I was like, but then I was like but at the same time, my brain was telling me this is what you wanted. You wanted friends who are going to, like, love Jesus genuinely and, like, love you genuinely and, like, invite you to things like this or, like, be open enough to make your friendship where it's not just surface level, right? Like, you're able to, like, deal with the hard stuff together or whatever.
Yeah.
So, my brain was like, "This is what you wanted. Like, don't back out." And so
Mm.
I was like but I was just battling it, and so finally, like, I text her and I was like, "Look, I'm just gonna be honest with you, like, I haven't been to church in a while, and I know when I go, I'm gonna be, like, a big blubbery mess, and I feel really awkward, like, being that way in front of you," and it's,
Yeah.
like, the church she attends. So I was like, "I
Yeah.
don't wanna be that way, like, in front of you and, like, I don't know, potentially a bunch of people that you know or whatever." So,
Yeah.
um we agreed to just, like, hang out doing something different for now, but, like,
Oh.
it was really, like, a battle in my brain where I was just like, I could just say, like, "I'm busy," and, like,
Yeah.
not in the sense of, like, I really cherish our friendship, so, like, in no way was it because I didn't wanna hang out with her, but I was just like, I could just say, like, "We're busy," but then my brain was just like, "No, like, you just need to be honest," and it was really unsettling to me to, like, be that honest with, like, a
Yeah.
friend, I guess. So, that's just something I've really been trying to do differently is just, like, even when it makes me really uncomfortable, like, just being honest about how I actually feel anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Well, good for you. I'm glad that you were able to do that.
yeah. We'll see. I don't like doing it, so
Just
it
keep
just
it up.
makes me really uncomfortable either way. So,
It'll get easier over time. I remember like I had kind of the same thing that I don't know, it was hard for me to be honest. I think because it's just easier to be like, "Hey, like I'm busy, I can't." And now like I try to be as honest as possible with people and it just feels like a lot lighter. And then you one because I would get to a point of like, "Oh, what did I tell them? Like did I tell them why I couldn't?" Cuz I just have to come up with like these elaborate like lies and stuff. I remember I was so nervous to go to it was similar. It was like a Bible study type thing. I was so nervous to go, that I told them I had COVID and I didn't, and I was like, why did I do that? Why couldn't I just told them, "Hey, like, I'm nervous, I haven't been around people and, like, done a Bible study in literal years," but now I'm just, like, completely honest, and it feels so much better, and I
yeah,
feel
the
like
situations have gone really well when I've been,
yeah,
like, in, like, these last few situations especially, like, have gone really well. Like, Colby handled the honesty really well, like, she handled the honesty really well. It's just it makes me really uncomfortable.
mm,
Even though the situations have gone well, I'm still like, maybe everybody doesn't need to know, like, my
well, yeah,
innermost feelings." But
yeah,
I know that being open and vulnerable, like, with people builds, like, makes your relationships a little bit stronger.
yeah,
So, I'm trying to focus on it as long as I'm not, like, you know, throwing TMI out there, which even then, like,
yeah,
sometimes that's okay,
yeah,
depending on your
mm,
friendships. But,
yeah.
um, okay, so today's topic is about forgiveness. So, we can talk about, forgiving ourselves for lying about stuff. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
So, what would you say forgiveness means to you? Like, if I just asked you, like, what's the definition of forgiveness? Like, what would you
that's a good question. I think, like, when I think of forgiveness, it it's basically like just letting stuff go. Like whatever has hurt you, and it could be big or small, but like letting go and making your emotions and inner self feel light, and not having to carry a lot of, you know, the really bad emotions that come with when people wrong you or when, you know, a like forgiveness is needed for a certain situation, if that makes sense.
Mhm,
I'm a very strong believer that like I get mad. Everybody does. People do things that hurt my feelings all the time. You know what I mean? Even if it's as small as like somebody cutting you off when you're driving or whatever it is. But I'm like a firm believer to just like let things go as much as possible because it's just not to me, a lot of these things are just like not worth getting upset over. So it's more so just like being intentional with releasing that emotion, but also recognizing that, if somebody did hurt you, like, yeah, they did hurt me and this did happen, but um, it's not mine to carry. And I don't want to carry it, if that makes sense.
yeah. I think for me, if I had to define forgiveness, I would say that it's, I feel like when you've truly forgiven somebody for something, you're not weighed down by it. Kinda
Yeah.
like, what you were saying or implying, like, it's it's because you can say, like, I've had plenty of situations in my life where, like, somebody has wronged me, and then they apologize, but I'm still mad. Like,
Yeah.
they will say, "I'm sorry," and I'm like, "It's okay," and then move on about doing whatever I'm doing, but then, like, a week later,
Hmm.
like, I'm still thinking about that thing, or I'm still like,
Yeah.
"I know, but this," like, I'm still angry about it, and so, for me, when you, like, actually practice forgiveness, like, you're no longer, like, carrying the weight of the emotions that you felt when that person wronged you. Um,
Yeah.
so psychologists generally define forgiveness as a conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance towards a person or group who has harmed you, regardless of whether they actually deserve your forgiveness. So I think that kind of like similar to what we were saying, just more technical
Yeah.
terms. um, so if we were to like break down what forgiveness is not, um,
Hmm.
because I think that like a lot of people, when they think about forgiving people, they're just like, they don't deserve it, they don't this, what they did was wrong, etcetera.
Yeah.
So I wanna break down kinda like what it isn't. more than what it is.
Yeah.
So I don't think that forgiveness is not forgetting what somebody did to you. So a lot of people feel like if they forgive somebody, it means that they're erasing the event from their memory. But really, in reality, forgiveness doesn't require us to forget what happened to us. Instead, it's
Mhm.
just about like changing our perspective, and then releasing the negative emotions, like you said, that were tied to the event. You can still acknowledge like the impact that it had on your life, like you said, like
Mhm.
you can still acknowledge what happened to you, but you release like the negative association with it. Um, so you don't have to forget the event completely.
Mhm.
You just kind of let go of the feelings and the negativity. Um, and then also, um, forgiveness is not excusing or condoning the behavior that somebody did.
Yeah.
So, like, forgiveness doesn't mean that we approve of what they did or we excuse their behavior. It just means that forgiveness involves like acknowledging the wrongdoing and then choosing to let go of it, and let go of like any associated negative feelings for your own personal like healing and growth.
Yeah.
So I know, in one of the episodes we had talked about the conversation that we had with Everly when she had like a disagreement with her great grandmother. And we
Mhm.
told her, like, well, when you see her, you need to apologize. And she was like, what? Like, she's the one that made me cry and blah, blah, blah. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, look, I really, like, I'm not saying that what you did, I mean, that what she did was correct. Like,
Yeah.
what she did was still wrong. She shouldn't have done or said whatever she did. But you also were wrong in the way that you reacted or what you said back to her. So
Yeah.
you need to apologize for what you did, but it does not condone or excuse what she did as well.
Yeah.
Like, does that make sense? So,
Oh, yeah.
um, I think that that's a very important thing to grasp, and I think when you can grasp that, like, that's when you can really start, like, the process of trying to forgive people for, like, wrongdoings, because that took a very
Mhm.
long time. That's probably what took me the longest, um, to grasp, is that you you can forgive people while still acknowledging that every single thing that they did in the situation or whatever,
Mhm.
anything they did or said was completely wrong and out of line,
Yeah.
but you can still let go of like your hate for them or your
Yeah.
whatever, that was associated with what they did that was wrong. So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think just as like, I guess it's kind of continuing this, but in a little bit of a different light. There are a lot of like misconceptions that go along with forgiveness. So, do you wanna go over, like, what some of those
Yeah.
are or look like so we can, like, break those down?
Yeah. So the first one is like forgiveness is a sign of weakness. Some people view forgiveness as a sign of vulnerability or weakness, but true forgiveness requires courage and inner strength. It's an empowering process that allows us to regain control over our emotions and overcome the pain caused by others. And I think that understanding that it's, sorry, I'm like having like the hiccups. Understanding that it's something that takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to do, um, almost empowers people to be more vulnerable and to be, or not be more, like be more vulnerable enough to forgive something that has wronged them. And that takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage to do that because it's very easy to remain in hate and dislike and to have grudges. Like that's a very easy emotion. And sometimes it feels good, you know, when somebody does something wrong to us, our natural sort of response to that is you want to get vengeance or you want there to be some sort of equal outcome for that person that has wronged you. And overcoming that emotion takes a lot of strength. One, a lot of self awareness. And two, like just kind of an understanding of how you want to live your life. And it comes with a lot of intention. So it's
Yeah.
definitely not a sign of weakness, even though some people can see it as such.
I think
And
that it's similar to what we were talking about as far as, like, me with the honesty, because it would have been so much easier to just be like, "Oh, sorry, like, I didn't know we already had plans," or, like, whatever, XYZ.
yeah,
You know, like, it would have been easier to do that, or even the situation with Colby, it would have been easier for Ooh, I really hope you did not hear my stomach growl that loud.
Did it?
Sorry. Um, but it would have been much easier for me to just stay mad at Colby or to just,
Yeah.
like, kind of ignore him, not ignore him completely, but just go about our normal tasks and avoid the conversation, for,
Yeah.
like, an extended amount of days until I was over it, like, it would
Yeah.
have been easier for me to do that. It definitely took more courage and more, like, vulnerability on my part to just be like, "No, I'm just gonna be honest, and then we'll see where that
Mhm.
gets me." Um,
Yeah.
so I agree that it's definitely it takes more courage and strength to forgive people, and I can say that from experience,
Yeah.
which we'll talk about a little bit later, but, um, yeah, sorry.
So another misconception is that forgiveness is only for the benefit of the offender. And I totally think that's not true. I think it benefits the forgiver more so than it does the offender, like every single time. Because I've been in situations where I've had to get forgiveness and also give it. And when someone forgives me, yes, it feels good and I feel lighter and I'm happy about it, but I still have I still am sad that I did something to hurt somebody, And when I give forgiveness, I feel a lot lighter and it's more for me and it's just very healing. But yeah, so forgiveness is often seen as a favor to the person who hurt us. While it can have positive effects on the offender, forgiveness is primarily for the benefit of the person doing the forgiving. By letting go of the resentment and bitterness, we improve our own emotional and physical well being. And I just think that it's totally true. It just allows for you to grow and, keep living your life without having this sort of weight like weighing you down, and I think it's something important to practice because like I said, it comes with a lot of intention. And I feel like forgiving people is a practice and you have to sometimes start small and start it in your everyday life, but learning to do that, you'll have a much lighter life, and probably be a happier person.
Yeah. Um, I think another, misconception is that, like, forgiveness requires reconciliation, which holds a lot of people back. I think that
Hmm.
people still being upset that they were hurt, or etcetera, like, it just let's take friendships, for instance. Like, let's say a friend did something really terrible and you don't wanna be their friend anymore or whatever, and you go through the process of forgiving them. A lot of people will hold out on that. Like, they'll hold on to the resentment and the pain for years and be like, "Well, I can't forgive them. Like, our friendship will never be the same." And, like, you don't even have to have a friendship. Like,
Yeah.
you can forgive people, and that does not mean you have to, like, be friends with them again. So,
Yeah.
um, I think that yeah, a lot of people have the misconception that, like, forgiving people means that you have to, like, rebuild your relationship with them, where that can be, like, an outcome. Like, let's say, like, for me and Colby, like, with the honesty thing, like, me choosing to be honest had a much better outcome than if I would have just continued to avoid it and pretend that, like, "Oh, it didn't happen," or whatever.
Yeah.
Forgiveness works a lot, like, in that same regard of you can forgive somebody and like, with my kids, for instance, like, if they snatch a toy from somebody from one another or vice versa, like, I'm like, "Okay, you need to give it back, you need to say you're sorry." I go through the whole conversation with them, but then they tend to go on playing like nothing ever happened. So sometimes
Yeah.
you can mend relationships by forgiving somebody for something they did wrong.
Hmm.
However, it's not a requirement. Like, in some
Yeah.
cases, it may not be possible or healthy for
Or
you
safe. Yeah.
yeah, to reestablish a relationship. Like, it can still take like, forgiveness can still take place even if we choose to maintain a distance or set boundaries with the people that hurt us.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I know that, like, personally for me growing up, like, I had to do like, as an adult, I've had to do a lot of forgiveness for things that either were outside of my mom's control, for, like, issues that I had growing up, and, like, even some things with my dad, like, um, I've forgiven them for it, and there are things that, I've forgiven and they've our relationship is better now and it's just something I've let go. But then there are things that, I've had to set boundaries on. And so, there are certain boundaries, not even just with my parents, but even with like my in-laws or whoever, like if I feel wronged by something, I can forgive you and we can still, obviously I'm still going to have a relationship with my parents and my mother-in-law and whatever, but our relationship can look a little bit different. Like it can look a little bit
Mhm.
different with boundaries so we can both ensure that whatever you did to hurt me like doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily meaning like, oh, I'm putting up walls and I'm just never going to trust you and I'm never going to whatever, but I think that it can um it can set boundaries so that you can kind of avoid, whether it's certain topics or
Yeah.
certain, situations. I think that that can be healthy. So there can be a middle ground, or there can just be one
Yeah.
extreme or the other. Like you could
Yeah.
just not have anything to do with them altogether, and I think
Yeah.
that's completely okay. And then the other thing is just that I think people have a misconception that forgiveness is a one-time event.
Mm.
I think that that was a hard thing for me to grasp as well, because there were certain situations where I would forgive somebody for something, and then 6 months down the road, I would be reminded of it, and it would completely wreck me again, and then I would be like, "Why am I upset about this? Like, I've forgiven them. Why am I still mad?" So forgiveness is definitely a continuous thing, especially if you, like, want to rebuild a relationship with somebody. There are probably going to be situations that come up throughout your friendship that may like trigger that like one time that they hurt you or whatever.
Yeah.
And so when those like triggers come back up, you just have to remind yourself, like, I've forgiven them, like I need to let this go again. And not let it like consume you again and like disturb your
Yeah.
friendship and your relationship. Or even if it's somebody that you have completely like cut off or whatever. Um, if you have worked through the process of forgiveness and then you get triggered or whatever, and you're kind of working through that again, like it's important to remind yourself that like forgiveness is not a one-time thing.
Mhm.
Um, it's an ongoing journey that like allows us to grow and heal, and continuing to like nurture those wounds every time they reopen
Yeah.
is just part of the healing process.
Yeah.
So I think that that's really important, is just continuously reminding ourselves that like forgiveness is really beneficial to us. And so if we
Yeah.
just continue to hold on to it and let it consume us, regardless of, whether we think we've forgiven somebody once or whatever, that it can be just as detrimental to hold on to it the second time around as it was to just hold on to it the first time around. So um yeah, I just think that it's better to just let it go.
So yeah, and speaking of the benefits of forgiveness, like physically as well as mentally, there's several different benefits to forgiveness for yourself. It reduces stress, improves your mental health. You have better relationships, better communication styles with the people that you're closest with. Lower your blood pressure, improved immune system, and it enhances personal growth and self discovery. Cortisol is a hell of a hormone, and when it's too high, you're holding all this stuff in. It can cause a lot of other like physical nuances and even very life-threatening things. I've seen studies where people who claim to be like more angry and just more um, not violent, but have violent tendencies, their their health is not great. You know, they have higher blood pressure. Their immune systems don't work all of the time. And yeah, so just learning to let things go can really, really, and when I say let things go, learning to forgive and to practice that in your everyday life is extremely beneficial physically, as well as mentally too. So yeah, those are
Yeah,
just
I
a few of those
think that
benefits.
Yeah, I think that for me, a big example of that, I'm gonna keep harping back to me and Colby because that's who I have the most interaction with. I interact with him way more than I interact with any of my friends.
Yeah.
Um, but for him and I, like, there are plenty of situations throughout the years we've been together where I've noticed after a disagreement, I'm so stubborn and I'm holding on to it. And I will know that I'm holding on to it and I will sit and stir in it.
Mhm.
And over the years, I've gotten better about that. And like, especially if I feel wronged, like I will die on that hill,
Yeah.
like of being angry. And so, lately I've been trying to make more of an effort to, um, process those steps of forgiveness. And granted, I'm not nearly as quick at forgiving, forgetting, and moving on as Colby is. Like he does it in like a 3-step process, and he's
Yeah.
like, "Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am," and he is done, and he's better, and he's happy, and I'm like, "Bro, how did your mood change so quick?" And I think that's maybe just a man woman thing, but
Yeah.
I definitely hold on to it, more, and so I notice in situations where I can convince myself, like, I know we talked about in the last episode that you and I did of, like, physically pulling yourself out of your physical self.
Yeah.
Like, there are plenty of times where I will literally, like, pull myself to Colby and be like, "Hug it out." Like,
Yeah.
give him a hug, tell him you love him, even though that's not what I wanna do in the moment. It helps me let go of those lingering feelings of just being upset.
Yeah.
Um, because he will apologize immediately. And I will always be like, "It's fine, it's okay, like, whatever," but I'm still holding on. Like, what I'm holding on to is the feelings of however what he did made me feel. And so I will go up to him and, like, hug him and tell him I love him, and typically he'll say something really stupid to make me laugh, and then I'm like, I'm feeling better. And I've
Yeah.
noticed that when I do that sooner rather than later, like, rather than holding on to it for a day or, like, and it whatever, and waiting until we go to bed to try to be like, "Okay, like, I love you," like,
Yeah.
at that point, then he's also more upset that I've held on to it all day and then made the rest of our day miserable.
Yeah.
Um, so I've noticed that when I practice forgiveness, in my everyday life, it definitely helps with our relationship, as well as, obviously it reduces my stress because I feel better faster. I'm not just
Yeah.
holding on to something and being grumpy and dealing with all that cortisol all day long. Um, it definitely improves my mental health because I suffer from depression. So if
Yeah.
I feel like something is off with Colby and I am so quick to just spiral and be like, "Oh, you're a terrible wife and you're a terrible mom and nobody likes you and your feet stink." And I will go down this rabbit hole of just thinking that I'm the worst person in the entire world, and then I will end up in, like, a depressive state for
Yeah.
days. So I can attest to it helping with my mental state. Obviously, anytime you're stressed, your blood pressure is gonna go up.
Yeah.
So, you know, all of those things I 100% agree with, but overall, I think it just helps me grow as a person. Um, like, combining all those things together, like, just
Mhm.
makes me, just a better wife and a better mom,
Yeah.
by being able to do that and practice it. And I understand that there are situations, I've had situations where it's not the forgiveness that you have to give is not a easy, simple, like 30-minute process. It's
Yeah.
weeks, years, like in the making.
Yeah.
So I've experienced both, but I think that it's very beneficial to us to try to practice the act of forgiveness with as many smaller situations as we
Mhm.
can rather than just hanging on to things that at the end of the day really don't matter.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of how mine started too. Is I would recognize. Well, I guess road rage is a big one. Like, not that I was ever extremely like violent on the road or whatever, but I noticed myself, even when I was like 16, 17, to first started driving, I would notice myself like get just really upset about people driving, and like didn't understand why I was getting so mad and upset. And even now in my day-to-day life, like I'll find myself, I'm like, oh my God, why is that person not going? Or I don't know. And it's not even necessarily like they're doing anything wrong and I need to forgive them for anything, but it's more of like, okay, like I need to let go of that, and just practicing to sort of pick what I put my energy towards. And forgiveness for me, like in those situations, is a much lighter route than staying mad all day about it or getting upset. And I've had situations too where it's been extremely difficult. It's been mostly with my family, but it's been extremely difficult for me to forgive some things that have happened in my life. And a lot of that sort of discovery and sort of healing from that and learning to forgive has happened through parts therapy. I do something called parts therapy, which without getting like super into it, it's basically, it's also called internal family systems, but basically what it is you have your now self, you have your current self, which would be my subconscious now as a 28-year-old, 27-year-old woman, and learning to sort of dive deep into some of those reoccurring things that you have to continuously forgive, learning to recognize where that's coming from internally, whether it's from a certain age of your childhood self, whether it's from, you know, a certain thing that happened to you that other events sort of remind you of that occurrence, and learning to validate it, learning, or how am I explaining this? Learning to validate the younger you or that younger self, um, as your older self, if that makes sense. Because a lot of the times when like this forgiveness that's really difficult to manage and to, you have to continuously forgive, that comes up, you're not going to get that validation like you did if you even were to have somebody apologize for you. A lot of the times, the ones that are harder to process are the ones where nobody's coming to apologize to you, and you're having to validate those feelings on your own, which, without validation, forgiveness is pretty hard. Like if nobody's coming to you and saying, hey, yeah, I wronged you, because you're having to validate that yourself. And I forgot where I was going with that, to be completely honest. But yes, it's very important. And that's kind of how I practice it. And that's what helps me a lot, to just stay really light. And it helps my anxiety so much because I think about and worry about literally everything, and that leaves me at the end of the day with not a whole lot of energy. Same with the depression stuff. I'm very quick to spiral into a hole, and I just try to keep my brain really light, um, and like remain in like a feedback loop of gratefulness and learning to forgive the small stuff, and it keeps me happy and healthy for the most part.
Yeah, I want to say, I want to talk about the steps to kind of achieving forgiveness or like going through the forgiveness process. But before that, I do want to like touch on something that ne- I feel like it doesn't need to be said, but I feel like because we're such complex people,
Mm-hmm.
um, nowadays, like I feel like it does need to be said. Like, and I think that's also that like forgiveness is not just for other people. Like
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness is for yourself. Like I have to forgive myself
Oh
all
God,
the
yeah.
time for like how mean I am to the kids or like how, grumpy I am with my husband because I was hungry or like even for things I don't actually do. Like I
Mm-hmm.
have to like I will get into my own head so many times and be like, "Man, like all you did was talk, 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 talk." And those people probably think that you're crazy and you're just a chatterbox and you're just whatever. And I will go down this hole of like convincing, like I said, convincing myself that I'm such a terrible person all around. And then like later when I've come down from that, like I have to constantly just like be patient with myself,
Mm-hmm.
and forgive myself for being so hard on me.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something that's like really important to note is that like you can practice. Maybe you have to start with yourself. Maybe start the process of forgiveness by forgiving yourself for things
Mm-hmm.
that you're mean to yourself about.
Yeah.
And then after that, then maybe the process of forgiving other people will just be, just a wee bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
I find it it's funny because I find it really easy to forgive other people for some reason. It's really hard for me to forgive myself. Like
yeah.
really, really difficult, and I don't know why that is. Like even today, I have a perfect example of it. Like I'm not happy with like the amount of weight that I've gained since probably like this time last year, because it's starting to get warmer outside. So I'm putting on my shorts and my like tank tops and short sleeves and stuff. And I'm looking at myself, and I've gained like, I mean, not a lot, but like enough for me to notice. And today I like had a moment. I'm like, why did you let yourself do that? Like, what is wrong with you? Just going in on myself. And I finally realized today, I'm like, bitch, you literally were like fighting for your life over the winter. Okay. You survived the winter. Like my depression was the worst it's ever been. My mental health was the worst it's ever been, this time last year. And like, it is okay. Like you literally were trying to mentally survive. So what, you put on a few pounds, like it's okay. Like, and just learning to be like, girl, it's fine. Like you
Mhm.
are forgiven. You didn't do anything wrong. You were fighting a different battle, and that's okay. Um, but sometimes it's really hard, and it's really easy for us to be really fucking mean to ourselves.
Yeah. So I think that the main steps for me that go into forgiveness are first like acknowledging the hurt and then accepting its impact on you. So like
Mhm.
not just saying like, oh, this is what they did that hurt me. Like, how did it hurt you? What
Mhm.
impact did what they did like have on you? More than just like, it made me mad.
Yeah.
Like, why did it make you mad? Like understanding what they did, or like understanding or acknowledging what that person did, and then understanding enough about yourself to realize like what kind of impact it has on you. I think that's like definitely the basis of
Yeah.
like, because you can't forgive somebody for something you don't understand.
Mhm.
The same way I don't feel like you can just stay mad at somebody for something that you don't understand.
Yeah.
Like going through the process, sometimes it's as easy as just step 1, because
Yeah.
sometimes you can be like, what did they do? Okay, they didn't put the bread back in the pantry, like whatever. And then you can be like, why did that make me angry? Well, because I'm OCD and I'm like, and then
Yeah.
sometimes you're just like, okay, well, there's no reason to be mad at them to begin with.
Yeah.
Like, so sometimes it's like little petty stuff, right? But then obviously there are other things that have really big impacts on us. And so understanding what those are make it a little bit easier to go through the rest of the steps, which I feel like step 2 is developing empathy for the person that caused you hurt. I think this is a
Mhm.
very hard one.
Yeah.
It's very hard to put yourself in the shoes of the person who hurt you. I experience this a lot with Colby. A lot of times he will be like, "Well, try to look at it from my perspective," or whatever. And when I'm angry, I'm like, "I don't want to." But later on, when we've like, calmed down or whatever, then I can be like, "Okay, I can see where you were coming from. I still don't like the way you handled it, but I can see where you were coming from." So having that empathy is really important.
Yeah.
Another big one for me was like my mom. I
Mhm.
used to have a lot of resentment for just the way my upbringing was, and just her being so busy and just being gone all the time or working all the time or whatever. But then I became a single mom myself, and I only had 1 kid and she
Yeah.
had 3. And so for me, I had a lot of empathy. I wasn't even trying to. It just happened. Like I had these moments where I was like, man, going to college, having a kid, working full time, more than full time. I was, trying to make literally as much money as I could because I had a person to raise other than myself.
Yeah.
Um, and so literally doing all of that and never having time to study and never having time to sleep and sometimes not even having time to eat. Like I was just so stressed out all the time. And I was just like, I could not imagine having multiple kids to take care of. So I gained this empathy for my mom in those situations, and it was easier. Like, I think over time, like, I forgave her without even trying to for
Yeah.
some of that stuff, because I just realized, like, okay, this is really hard,
Mhm.
and I couldn't imagine having, like, it harder than I currently do. So I don't think that all of the deciding to not be there all the time, like, was really a choice. It was just a mode of survival, and so going through that process, I think was really, really helpful, for me. And then I think it's helpful to try to always empathize on some level with the person that hurt you.
Yeah.
And then I would say, like, letting go of your resentment, your negative feelings. Typically, that comes with the second one, which is like once you can develop empathy, you can say you have the ability, like I said, to more acknowledge what they did and it being
Mhm.
wrong. But then, like, when you can make yourself understand things from their perspective or from their situation or from their point of view on life, like, you can then I feel like you naturally just release that negativity
Mhm.
and those hurt feelings for the most part, right? Like, some of it may linger, obviously, like, especially if a relationship with someone ends, like a friendship or whatever. If a relationship ends, then there's going to be that lingering, like, upset of not having
Mhm.
that person in your life anymore. But the resentment and the anger and those really negative feelings that really release all that cortisol and bring you down, I think that those are naturally released when you can realize, okay, I don't agree with what you did and I don't agree with how you handled it or whatever, but I can understand from your perspective why you thought that that was
Mhm.
the right way to go.
Yeah.
And then the last one I feel like really just depends on situations. And that is just being able to move forward. Well, moving forward is always the next step, but rebuilding trust and relationships. So that's
Mhm.
going to be with somebody that you continue to have in your life. And like I said, sometimes that can look just a little bit differently, like by setting boundaries. And then sometimes it can just go completely back to normal. And then sometimes, obviously, you just can't be around people or situations altogether.
Yeah.
And so there isn't that second part of like rebuilding. But definitely being able to move past it is really important. And then working with that person um, to just rebuild the relationship and the trust and whatever else may have been broken
Mm-hmm.
due to the situation. So, what would you say are like taking all these steps into consideration? Like, what would be a really good life example of yours where you've had to practice like these steps? Like, whether it's with yourself or whether it's with somebody else, like, when have you kind of had to go through this whole process? Like,
So, an example of like, I think one of the hardest processes of forgiveness that I've had to go through was in college. So, in college, me and six other girls lived in this house that was really close to campus. But one of the roommates that lived in this house with us, she was my freshman year roommate. So we were dorm mates. After that, we lived in an apartment together, and then we moved into this house with six other girls. So I had known her all 4 years of college. We were really, really close. And her parents were in charge of basically they were like the middleman in between the landlord and us. So the landlord didn't want to deal with all of the like subleases for all of the rooms. So he wanted to just do one lease and then have somebody's parent basically like be in charge of subleasing. So her parents decided to do that. And like, so she was in charge and her parents were in charge. So at the end of like I think junior year, I had applied to UGA and gotten in, and I was going to transfer, and then it ended up not working out. But because I was going to transfer, they had given my room up to somebody else. So there were now seven people in here. There weren't seven rooms, there were only six rooms. But now I was here, and they let me stay because one of the girls was going to leave within the 6 months of the semester. So we like did a makeshift room in the like kitchen area, like everything closed and everything. So it was technically a room, but it was sort of like a makeshift area. So when that happened, everyone was kind of like, oh, like rent's going to go down because instead of dividing the rent by six, we're going to divide the rent by seven. And when we brought that up to the person who was in charge and her parents, they were like, no, the landlord still wants to charge the 425 regardless of the amount of people that are here. And we thought that was kind of weird and, didn't really say anything about it. But as the semester started like rolling around and we were into senior year, we started noticing that the roommate that was in charge, um, she ended up like quitting her job, which she was in like an education cohort. So it was hard for her to work anyway, but she still had to work, like on the weekends and stuff. She ended up quitting her job. She got a brand new car. She started getting like several packages, like without a job, like to the house and stuff. And it was just like, it was enough to make you kind of like turn your head a little bit and just be like, what's going on? And like an extra like $500 a month isn't that much, but like, well, I'm getting to it. So basically, we had suspicions that they were pocketing the extra cash. And we didn't confront them about it because we didn't have any evidence. And there was one day that she had asked me, because what we did to pay the landlord was we just, she would write the check and like give it to him in Milledgeville because that's like he lived there. So it's easy to do that. One day she forgot to pay the rent and she had asked me, hey, like the check is written out on my desk. Can you grab it and like meet the landlord and pay it? So like, yeah, no problem. So when I grabbed the check, it was for the amount of six people times the 425 or times the 500 or whatever. So that is when it was confirmed for me that like the extra payments or the extra rent money was going to them and it wasn't actually going to the landlord to pay for the rent. And that's when you realize they had been pocketing this money. And we kind of brought it up very slightly and it caused a huge uproar. So we kind of let it go because it was our senior year and we like all the roommates were aware at this point. Like we had all talked about it. And basically what had happened was there was one day, one of the roommates overheard the roommate that was in charge. I feel like saying names is easier, but I'm kind of just weary. But the roommate that
It's
was in
okay.
charge.
I'm following along, so I think it's
Okay.
okay what you're doing.
The roommate that was in charge was on the phone with her parent, with her mom. And the roommate that lived next to her, which she was also aware of kind of the situation that was going on, overheard her mom say something along the lines of, well, it's okay if you can't pay, you know, if you can't pay your car payment because we have that extra money from Jenna's rent, which because I was the extra person. So again, that confirms it for us. And obviously, we're all upset. The other roommate tells everybody else about it. And we try to have a conversation with the girl in charge, and she's not having it. She's denying it. She's getting really defensive, really upset. Um, and it starts a fight. Like they're at this point, it's like ending senior year and it starts a fight. And it stays kind of settled. We don't bring it back up again because we're about to graduate. We don't want all this tension, even though the tension is very present. And then it blows up after graduation because that's when we're getting ready to move out. And they come back and they're basically saying, we have to pay all of this extra money to the house because of the animals and which mind you I was the only one that paid a pet deposit, and that should have covered wear and tear, and that's what it said in the lease. Everyone else that had animals there did not pay a pet deposit. I was the only one. And they came to me basically saying, well, Samson was the only pet here, and the pet deposit doesn't cover all the wear and tear. And I was like, he was not the only pet. Okay, let's get that straight right here. I'm not paying you any more money. And they kept asking for all this extra money from all of the roommates, basically. And that's when we brought it up. We were like, I didn't. One of my other roommates did because it was just me and her there that summer. And she was feeling ballsy this day. And she responded and she said, based off of our calculations, this is how much money that you have pocketed extra since there's been 7 girls here. It should be plenty to cover it. And all hell broke loose. Like all hell broke loose. And it turned into like a year-long fight, basically. No one ever apologized. Like even still to this day, I have not gotten an apology. And they were very rude to us. They called us all kinds of names, but we had proof that they were doing it to us, and not one apology was had. And I think because I had such a close knit relationship with this roommate, even her family, like her family was really good to me too. I struggled a lot financially in college, and they knew that, which also kind of hurt even more. Um, and they helped me with stuff sometimes. Like I can remember one time I didn't have money for groceries, and when they came to uh like get her and get her groceries, they also let me get groceries. And like I felt very like very close with this group of people, and to have them do something like this and deny it was extremely hurtful because that long friendship that I had with them and that close knit relationship I had with her family, I just felt really, really backstabbed. And like I said, there was no apology. Like, still to this day, we haven't gotten an apology. And they said some really horrible, mean things to us when we were just trying to get answers, and treated us really, really poorly. So, going through that process was really difficult to forgive because, one, there wasn't any validation for my feelings and how I was feeling from the people that hurt me. So they never came back and said, yes, we were wrong. Will you forgive us? Nothing like that happened. I basically had to learn that I needed to validate it for myself and let go of some of that resentment because I was mad. And I don't get mad very easily, but I was upset. I was mad. I felt like I had been so betrayed, and it took a really long time. And even talking about it now, like it still kind of upsets me. And just knowing that I will, one, not ever get that money back. And two, what they did was wrong. They basically stole from us and they lied to us in a major way. And then again, asked for more money that they were most likely going to pocket. And I don't know, it was just really difficult for me to forgive. But the process that I used to go through it was exactly what we talked about in the steps, acknowledging the hurt and the impact it had on me. The biggest impact, which thankfully I never had to live with anybody else but Dion, the impact was I'm not going to trust anybody with money. Like friends and business, friends and financial stuff needs to be discussed like immediately. Like if we ever start making money off of this podcast, I feel like that's one of the impacts is like I want it to be super clear is like, we need to write out stuff financially, but then also I care about our friendship enough that we need to discuss like how to keep those separate. And if that means bringing somebody else in to manage that money or whatever it is, it's important
Mhm.
for me to keep those separate. And that's the impact that it had on me. And also, developing a little bit of empathy. Like, even though it was wrong, she was struggling to work, and I think they just saw an opportunity and took it. Can't say that I would do the same thing, and it is technically stealing, but empathizing in the way of like, okay, maybe she was desperate for the cash and needed a situation. And, you know, there have been times where I've been desperate for cash and I haven't stolen from anybody, but, um, like I tried to empathize in that way. And also understanding that, um, the roommate that was in charge that did all of this, like understanding that like her parents had a huge influence over her, and maybe she was pressured into do this because her family was handling all of the money and stuff. Like, she didn't directly have the money; it was going to her parents' account. So maybe there was a big influence there, and trying to empathize with the fact of like maybe she knew what was going on, didn't like it, but like her parents were involved, and what are you going to do? Like, go against your parents? Just trying to create that. But then a lot of it trying to like let go of that resentment. Again, it was really difficult, and it still gets brought up a lot. But um like, this person's human, people make mistakes. We were really young, we didn't know how to handle the situation. Nobody in that house knew how to communicate well, at all, so I don't think that helped anything. And yeah, just learning that like I'm very far away from that now, and I've learned kind of how to proceed with those things. I've gained a lot of knowledge from it, and that person is really no longer in my life, even though I want them to be. I think focusing on how special that friendship was to me, even like now, even though we're not friends, focusing on how special that friendship was for me, what I learned from her, how thankful I was to have her, like in the times that I needed her, has helped to release a lot of the negative emotion and resentment, because in comparison to the bad, like there's way more good that came out of the friendship. So, and then also like within like my personal growth and stuff, it feels really good to be able to, if it feels like a mature thing to do. Like, I feel like I'm not going to let that harbor in my soul forever. And um it feels like a mature thing to do, and to intentionally let things like that go, because like it doesn't serve me whatsoever, and it's over with and done. But yeah, I know that was kind of like a long-winded explanation, but that's kind of what happened. And I thought the backstory was important, so sorry if I was
Yeah.
rambling, but
No, it's okay. I would say that for me, like, working through this process, the biggest, longest experience that I've had with forgiveness is, um, through my past with being sexually assaulted.
mm,
Um, I think that it didn't take long for me to acknowledge the hurt. Like, obviously,
mhm,
like, what happened and the negative emotions that came with it and everything like that. Um, it did take Oh, sorry. It did take, time to figure out the full impact that it had on me,
mhm,
because for a long time after that, I basically just tried to numb all of my feelings,
yeah,
whether that was through, like, alcohol or, sex with other people or whatever. Like, I just tried to, like, focus on any other feeling other than that.
mhm,
And so once I got to a point where I was in a serious relationship, like especially my relationship with Colby, there were a lot of times where like my PTSD would kick in, or like something would happen and like I would get triggered and I would just shut down, or like whatever all of those feelings were, like started bubbling to the surface because they had never really been dealt with.
mhm,
And Colby came into my life 3-ish years after the fact. So, it wasn't too far past, when it happened. I mean, at the time, it seemed like a long time, and I was beating myself up a lot saying, like, "You should be over this," like, whatever. But there were also still times where we had mutual friends and, like, people would bring that person up, and, um, or whatever, or, like, even he would reach out to me just randomly, and so
Mhm.
there were just a lot of situations that would just bring all of that back to the surface. So it took me a long time to even acknowledge the different kinds of impacts that it had on my life, both emotionally and, like, physically sometimes. The hardest part for me was developing empathy.
Mhm.
Um, that was the the hardest thing to do because with such a negative act, people, like, especially any person that you talk to about it is going to say, like, "What do you mean?" Like, they're a horrible person. Anybody that would do
Mhm.
that is like, and ultimately, that's how I felt in the beginning. Like, I was terrified all the time. I was mad all the time. Like, for years, all I had was negative, angry, mean emotions. But over time, I was able to differentiate between what he did and who he is.
Mhm.
And so I think part of that is the fact that I knew the person that did it. And so I constantly would have to remind myself, like, even though I think overall, like, he is a pretty shitty person, I
Mhm.
don't really like the person that he is. I know that he's not going around intentionally doing that.
Yeah.
The situation in of itself, like, there was alcohol involved, there was, even though I under no circumstances excuse what he did, I think that over the years, I was able to empathize with how it happened.
Mhm.
Um, and it was never me saying it was okay that it happened. It was just, looking at it from a different perspective than being the victim of it. And
Yeah.
so being able to do that, like I said, ultimately allowed me to let go of a lot of the hate that I had.
Yeah.
And whereas I absolutely have had nothing to do with them in the last, I don't know how many years. I did have to talk to him a little bit. Um, like, when was that? 3 years ago? 2 years ago? I don't remember. Whatever year Colby adopted, like, legally adopted Everly, I did have to
Mhm.
talk to him throughout that process. But before that, um, it had been years since I talked to him. So, um, even though that person is not a part of my life or a part of Everly's life, I was able to, like, heal myself, um, through forgiving them. And I think
Yeah.
that being able to, like, forgive somebody when, like you said, there is no validation. There was never an admission to what was done to me. There
Yeah.
was never, an acknowledgement of how wrong it was. There was never, like, I don't wanna say an "I'm sorry" for the fact that I got pregnant out of it, but, like,
Yeah.
because obviously I love Everly more than anything, but there was never, like, "I'm sorry that this obviously, like, wasn't just a once." Like, it ruined your life from a sexual assault perspective, but it
Yeah.
also completely altered your life because now you have a child that you weren't
Yeah.
expecting to have,
Yeah.
especially at that age. And so there was never any conversation between the 2 of us where it was, or between anybody else. I mean, there were years where there was a denial that it was even his kid, like,
Mhm.
that anything in between him and I ever happened or whatever, even though there were plenty of people who knew,
Yeah.
even though we had, like, a DNA test
Mm.
that, like, physically proved it. I had all of the evidence, but there was still so much denial that went into it, and I think that fueled my anger and my
Mhm.
frustration, for those first few years, and I think that, that anger and frustration also helped me shove down all of the more sensitive emotions,
Yeah.
like the pain and all the other stuff. So I for the first few years, I was just fueled by fear and anger and hatred, and so in being able to forgive somebody who would and probably still never will admit what they did or what they did being wrong, um, I think that that is, like, a whole 'nother level of strength in being able
Yeah.
to say, like, "I absolutely, like, I don't hate you. I don't wish any ill will towards you. I hope that you're happy. I hope that you are living your best life with your, I guess, girlfriend, fiance, I don't know what she is at this point, but, like, your person and y'all's kids. and your new life. Like, I'm hoping all of the best for you, but I
Mhm.
also absolutely never want you within 10 feet of me.
Yeah.
Like, I think that there's a difference in being able to say that, like, right, I'm no longer driven by fear, I'm not scared to be around you anymore. I'm no longer driven by anger because I
Mhm.
don't wish any negativity towards you. But I do have those boundaries of, like, I don't ever want you around me, I don't ever want you around my daughter.
Yeah.
I You don't have anything positive to bring into my life or her life or
Mhm.
whatever, and so I think that there is a lot of strength in being able to do that, and so there was a lot of work, and even it's an ongoing thing for me, but there's a lot of work that has gone into me being able to move forward, past that, and obviously there was not really a rebuilding of trust for the 2 of us, but there was I guess, a rebuilding of respect.
Yeah.
I and not in the way that it sounds, but, like, I used to never be able to have a conversation with them without it constantly just being defensive and angry, like, from both sides, like, defensive and angry and lots of mean things being said and whatever. So when I went into this adoption process a few years ago, I was terrified, like, terrified. Like, when the lawyer told me that it would be better for me to reach out to them,
Mm.
I was like, "Are you serious?
Mm.
Like, do you know what you're asking?" Like, so, um, I was terrified initially, but the conversations were I was able to have a conversation with him respectfully, and even if he asked something of me that I thought was ridiculous, I was able to just say, like, "Okay, I'll think about it, I'll see what I can do," and just move past that. I
Yeah.
didn't get hung up on, "I can't believe he just asked me to do that. I can't believe he just said that." Like,
Yeah.
after everything, like, because I feel like before I would've been like, "After everything you put me through and after everything I've had to do since this happened, like, this one thing that happened in your life that you've probably never thought about another day in your
Yeah.
life has affected me for almost 10 years." And I'm like, but I felt like that was such a huge growth moment for me, was to be able to
Mhm.
have those conversations, and whereas there was one situation in which I think I don't know if he left me a voicemail or something, but there was one situation in which, like, he, I guess, was driving, so I don't remember if it was a talk text or he called and left me a voicemail, but, like, there was one situation where I remember I was in the car and I was like, "What is this?" And I, like, played it, and the fact that I had to hear his voice,
Mm.
it triggered a lot of emotions in me, that I wasn't really ready for. I thought, like, again, I thought I had moved past it, um, and I had. Like, I don't wanna say I thought I had. I had moved past it, but then hearing that just kind of, made made a lot of feelings resurface,
Yeah.
and it took a lot for me to, like, just breathe, let it go, all of those sorts of things, and for me to be able to say and set that boundary of, "Hey, I don't mind answering these questions for you," or "I don't mind whatever, but our conversation is going to be through text or through email." Like, I don't wanna literally talk to you,
Yeah.
because I knew that the impact that that had on me, and I can still text you respectfully, I can still talk to you to get accomplished what we need to get accomplished, but I don't want to hear your voice,
Yeah.
and I don't want, to have any sort of ongoing relationship with you after this. I think that that was overall just a really big moment for me, so I think that
Yeah.
it's really important to remember when you're going through the process of, like, forgiveness and everything, acknowledging that it is a constantly ongoing process. This is something that, whereas I've come a long way in the 9.5 years since that incident happened, I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
I've had situations that have not even been, like, I don't know, a few weeks ago, where something will trigger my PTSD, and it's part of living after something like that happens, but not allowing it to, like, completely shut me down. So,
Mhm.
it's just an ongoing battle of just constantly reminding myself, like, "Hey, you've forgiven him for this. Don't let it ruin your mood or your
Mhm.
relationship with your current husband or your relationship with your kids or your relationship with your friends or whatever. Like, don't let it ruin the good things that you have going on in your life because you've worked so hard to get where you are."
Yeah.
So I do encourage, anybody that's struggling with forgiveness to mostly, like, seek help. Like, whether you talk to your friends about it or your spouse or a professional therapist. I think it's really important to talk through the process of forgiveness. We didn't really touch on that a lot, but I think that being able to share those emotions and like we said, the impact that those hurts had on you with another person kind of helps you process them a little better. Like when you can
Mhm.
hear them out loud, sometimes you can be like, okay, that was a little crazy. I probably shouldn't have got mad.
Yeah.
Or getting somebody else's perspective can also help. And it doesn't have to be the person who hurt you. Like I said, it can be a therapist, it can be another friend, it can be your mom if like that's somebody you feel confident in like calling and, venting to. But I think that seeking help in the process of forgiveness is really important.
Mhm.
Not to let those negative emotions just like sit in you and eat at you and bother you all the time. Obviously, you're more than welcome to reach out to us.
Mhm.
You can get in contact with us on any of our social media channels. I think our handle is at diff.onpurposepod.
Mhm.
Or you can send us an email, which we check pretty regularly at differentonpurpose.pod@gmail.com. We thank you guys for being here. We appreciate all of you who take the time to listen to all of our stories. And we just would like, if you know somebody who would benefit from this episode, please share it with them. If you like our content and you want to see more or listen to more, depending on which way you're hearing us right now, just please make sure to like and subscribe. We would love to hear from you on our social media channels, even if it's not about forgiveness, even if you just want to leave a lovely comment or tell us about your day or whatever.
Yeah.
We would love to talk to you. So that's all we have
Okay.
this week.
Yeah. Be sure to join us next week for another exciting episode.
Bye, guys.